She was a woman in her mid-30s, she'd had a career, she was a famous actress. She was a grown woman.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what kind of guidance did she need?
Women marrying into the royal family get such a bad time from the press. If this was happening today, it will be so much worse.
Hello and welcome to this True Royalty original programme with me, Laurence Llewelyn-Bowen. And in this show, we will be discussing one of the most controversial contemporary members of the royal family, who is the real Meghan. I'm joined in the studio by royal commentator Afua Hagan and The Sun's royal correspondent and editor, Matt Wilkinson. Welcome. Very nice to see you both here. Looking very comfortable as well.
Thanks.
Very relaxed.
Great sofa.
In the
I love
concept. It's almost as if it is impossible not to open a newspaper or go to a newsfeed without there being something coming from Meghan at the moment. And we've had a very recent admission from her, which is sort of, I mean, certainly caused a bit of a wry smile with me. And it's all about tights.
Tights. Oh,
Tights.
Tights. The thing you point out there about Meghan is that she's often the biggest source of information about Meghan. I mean, she talks a lot. She gives lots of interviews. She's always on telly. So we can hardly avoid her when we're writing about her because she's always there front and centre, you know, talking about herself and coming up with new lines. And I'm uncomfortable in many ways. Meghan was uncomfortable, but I'm uncomfortable about this tights line because she used it in an interview that she's doing to promote her show and said that she couldn't be her authentic self when she was in the royal family. And one example she used was that she had to wear tights. I'm disappointed that she's come out with this line because it feels to me she's moved on from the royal family. The last 4 or 5 years, she's done a show, she stopped talking, stopped criticising everybody, stopped criticising the UK. So I was a little bit irritated with her that maybe the mask slipped a little bit and she went back to her original complaints about time in the UK. So.
I mean, to be fair, Afua, you know, she herself said that this was sort of a rather whimsical thing, wasn't it? The pantyhose gate.
Yes, pantyhose gate.
Pantyhose gate. She herself has said this was rather a frivolous thing.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it does, I mean, as Matt says, it's sort of like, it feels a bit like the old Meghan. Surely we all feel as if she's actually moved on and is developing a new, much more authentic her.
I mean, this kind of old and new Meghan narrative is one that I don't buy into. She's been her authentic self the whole time. But I do think, you know, she was asked about, you know, about being in authentic times where she's felt that she couldn't be 100% herself. That's what I mean to say, rather than use the word inauthentic. And, you know, this was a prime example of that. And like she said, just quite like a light-hearted, frivolous story. I don't think she was necessarily complaining about anyone or anything. She's talking about something that happened. She's talking about some of maybe the rules and regulations that other people might not know about of being within the farm. And one of those was you have to wear pantyhose with every single outfit. And it was something she wasn't used to.
But
is there a law written down saying that you have to wear pantyhose?
No, and if you look at the pictures, sorry to interrupt, if you look at some of the pictures, it's simple, you know, Google evidence search. She often isn't wearing pantyhose or tights. It's almost like what she didn't seem to understand is that she was working and there's almost a uniform. If you know, I have to wear a suit and a tie to work. So sometimes her story, unfortunately, does, as usual, break down a little.
I don't think it's about her story breaking down. There was times where she had to wear the tights and she wore the tights, and there's times where she didn't have to. I'm not sure if we need to pull it apart as much as, you know, to say her story is breaking down.
But of course, the problem is that this is something that she, as Matt says, this is something that she herself has said. This is not something that people have come to a conclusion about. She has actually pushed this forward as something that she felt, you know, undermined how she enjoyed the work that she was doing.
Yeah, and how she enjoyed clothing and fashion. We know that that's something that's very important to her. So how she was able to express herself. You know, she talked about in the past about colours that she had to wear, you know, that there was certain rules and regulations about the clothes. Like you so rightly said, actually, Matt, that it was a bit of a uniform. And perhaps that was unexpected for her. I think that's probably more of the point.
And I think that's a very, very interesting point, because also I think the other thing is as well is that there's probably quite a lot of quiet pressure from the late Queen about how, she liked people to present themselves in a way that anyone's grandmother is going to do that. When you go to see your granny and you're not kind of dressed in the way that she would approve, she's going to pass a comment on that. And perhaps this was the idea of wearing pantyhose was actually it's kind of respect for an older generation rather than I hate the idea of the British royal family, the British monarchy after 2,000 years, sort of rising or falling based on pantyhose.
No, so I don't think it's the most important thing, and that's why I find it, it's not, it's just pantyhose, it's just tights. It's the fact that she brought it up 5 years later as an example of how she felt she was not allowed to be herself in the royal family. It's just such a small, insignificant, trivial thing to still be banging on about 5 years later.
But Matt, you have to remember that she was being interviewed and she was asked a question and she answered it, and that was the answer she gave. And actually, she might have thought of something else that could have been much more dramatic or much more serious that she could have said. And actually, she chose to talk about the tight story, which, like you said, is quite frivolous. The thing is, if you're asked a question in an interview and you answer it, what else do you want her to do? Or do you want her to plead the fifth? Would that be better?
If I was working for her team, and I'm not, I would have asked them to cut that out because it's just not within her current message. Her message is to be very friendly, not controversial, not criticise the royal family or the UK. And I was so disappointed and surprised to see that made the cut.
But then, Matt, if for any reason we got a whiff sort of 2 months later, 2 years later, that, we were told not to ask questions about the royal family or she refused to answer, then the story now becomes Meghan refuses to talk about her time within the royal family. How dare she not acknowledge it? Do you know what I mean? When it comes to Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, there's always something. She can't do right for doing wrong, Matt.
No, but I think the other thing, but this is the thing about fame, isn't it? Fame is a terribly slippery fish. And particularly these days, it's not just about how you're perceived through the press. It's actually how people are going to form opinions on social media and stuff like that as well. So actually, it's this issue where, when you are a celebrity, you are obviously there famous for being you. When you're a royal, you're kind of famous for being part of an organisation. It becomes much more complicated, doesn't it, Matt?
It does, and I refer to my earlier point that she was working, and I think Meghan has always wanted to be a celebrity. It's quite clear she wanted to be a celebrity because she got into acting. I mean, you get into acting because you kind of want to be famous. You want I assume. It's not something I want, but I assume that you want the money, you want the fame, you want the mansion, you want the private jet, you want to be a billionaire. She then married into the royal family thinking, well, this is the ultimate celebrity. But it's not. You don't become the ultimate celebrity. You suddenly have to work for your living, which is duty, is service. It's turning up on a wet Wednesday in Stoke, no offence to Stoke, but to open
all
up
wet Wednesdays. I don't want to
open up a shopping centre somewhere. And I don't think she kind of got that. She thought it was celebrity. She was from the celebrity world.
Well, I think this is fascinating, because actually, she is very much from a completely different world. She is from California.
Yeah.
She's from a space where, everybody is brought up to believe that they can achieve whatever they want to do. They can be whatever they want to be. It's also, powerful, empowering.
That's the American dream.
It is the American dream. But specifically as well, I always thought it was interesting because the reference points that you get in Hollywood towards royal families are very, very kind of one note. You've got to think of things like The Princess Diary, Genuvia, Roman Holiday, and it's always this idea of a young, beautiful woman coming into this crusty, crumbly institution and gets them to, go up and down the palace in roller skates or something. But there's always this concept that they're going to change, and they're going to change it overnight, and it's going to be a bit kind of tricky, but they're going to make it better and relevant. And do you think that was a kind of scenario that was playing out in Meghan's head a bit?
No, because she's not 12.
True.
She married into the royal family as a grown woman who had actually been working as an actress. She was working on set, on Suits. She wasn't like gallivanting around the Californian hills.
No.
She was working in Toronto on the set of Suits and met Harry, gave up that job. Let's also remember she was writing her lifestyle blog, Tig, for years as well. Before that, she was also doing philanthropy and humanitarian work. So I don't think that she sort of, skipped up to the gates of Buckingham Palace
On a unicorn.
On a unicorn with a crown perched onto
But
on
that
her
said,
head.
and I completely get that, of course, because she was an incredibly sophisticated woman, already been married. You know, actually, you know, there's no ingenue about this. There's no naivety. But is there a kind of a political sense that actually she went into the royal family thinking that they needed shaking up, and they needed shaking up by her?
I think she married into the royal family because she fell in love with someone who happened to be Prince Harry, right? Son of the heir to the throne. And yes, in marrying him, she became part of this family. I don't necessarily think that she went into it thinking, I know what I'll do this year, let me shake up the British royal family. She fell in love with someone, but also knew she was going to join this family. So she thought, the work that I've done outside this family in terms of philanthropy and humanitarian work, these are things I can continue.
I can bring with me into, absolutely.
Within this institution, and perhaps widen it out to more people, more communities, whether they be in the UK or outside. I think she probably had those thoughts after the thinking of, I've fallen in love with this person and we're getting married. But I don't think she was leading with, let me shake up a ye olde British institution.
Sure. But Matt, because this actually all comes right back to the pantyhose, because this is what the question was all about, which was joining the royal family. Meghan has said that she felt that she wasn't given much guidance about how to cope with this, and the tights were specifically mentioned in that context. So, you know, do we are we supportive of that as an idea? Do we feel that she should have been given more support, more encouragement?
Well, you mentioned it earlier. I mean, she was a woman in her mid-30s. She'd had a career. She was a famous actress. She'd come from relatively humble beginnings. Very successful, educated, travelled the world. She wasn't like a spring chicken. It wasn't like Princess Diana came into the into the royal family, and that was obviously very difficult for someone that young. She was a grown woman.
Yeah.
You know, and what kind of guidance did she need? I mean,
well, this is it, and because I think it's a bit like, you know, we've all started that new job, and there's been someone there that's shown you where the kettle is and how to work the photocopier, but sometimes there isn't. So you've got to then go and find the photocopier. You've got to work out the catch.
She was given staff.
Yeah.
She was allowed to choose her own staff. She was allowed to choose her own projects. She was allowed to choose her press spokesman. She moved someone over from America. An American woman called Sarah Latham was, to be her spin doctor. She was given every opportunity, but she didn't need to be treated like a child. She was treated like an adult. And you mentioned about, was she naive? I think she might have been naive. I think she may have come in. It's not that she wasn't guided. I think she maybe came in with some naive ideas about what she could and couldn't do in the royal family. And then when people told her, well, you can't really do that this way,
you've got to dial that back.
That's when I think problems start.
Well, let's start. I mean, because the big thing also is actually how she went down, particularly in this country. I mean, how the press treated her, how the public treated her. When do you feel there was that turning point? Because to begin with, there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, and then suddenly there was the cracks beginning to show. There's a lot of kind of denigrating press coverage beginning to sneak in.
Well, I think firstly there was a lot of bad coverage at the beginning, and I think the newspapers and some of the coverage was pretty dreadful. To be honest, when she first started in the first couple of years, it was pretty bad, and I don't think. I think it was a shameful time, and I don't think that would happen again. But
really,
I
in
don't
this
think
current
so.
climate,
no,
it would be worse.
And I think you look back at every woman that was married into the royal family, even as far back as Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the Queen Mother, there was snobbishness towards her. Princess Diana. Sarah Ferguson, Sophie, even the Princess of Wales.
Well, I mean, what about Camilla?
Camilla. There's something wrong that women marrying into the royal family seem to get awful treatment. But there was bad, and the first couple of years, I think there was just some frivolous stories. We treated her like clickbait. She was something that would sell because people were interested in her without thinking about the human being. And I do think things have changed.
And she was very different as well, because that's the other thing is that, she was the first celebrity in the royal family. Yeah. People had actually seen her on telly. Someone like Kate coming into the royal family, that was kind of much more sub-fusk. She'd come from the right kind of background, but nobody really knew where she was from. But this is an alliance.
But this is the thing, is that it's one of the only times I'm going to agree with you, Matt, is that
can we remember this moment as a team?
You're 100% correct in that women marrying into the royal family get such a bad time from the press. because they're an easy target, because they're not within the farm, and it's very easy for them to be the villain, make them the villain of the piece. We always need to have a villain, someone that we need to attack, someone that we need to, splash all over the front pages. And so people marrying into the royal family, young women, are made to be the villain. But I think where it's different with Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, is that as soon as the press realise that this woman is not white, then it gets dialed up to another level. And then you have the headlines like almost straight out of Compton, or whatever else disgusting headlines came out. But I disagree with you, Matt, that if this was happening today, it will be so much worse, especially in the current political climate that we are in. There's no lessons have been learned. No lessons have been learned from the way that she was written about, the lies that were written about her, the way that she was treated. And I think in this current political climate, it would be so much worse.
Harry became very, very protective, didn't he? And he's quite a fiery person. He's not, he's not an emollient person. He doesn't sort of try and, change things subtly. Actually, he just went straight for the jugular. There's this whole thing about in the old days, perhaps the firm would have taken the right kind of, the editors out to lunch and said to, look, come on, guys, this is rubbish. He didn't. He just came out all guns blazing, didn't he?
Very early on, he came out with a letter that was sent round, and I think he had. We agree. He had, I think, justifiable complaints about the treatment of Meghan in the early days. I think that letter was a mistake. I think his sentiments were right. I think his goal was a good goal, but the way they went about it, what it did right from the early stage was to. Is the right word, exceptionalise Meghan. It marked her out immediately as different, and it asked for different treatment. It asked for, just basically to be dealt with in a different and maybe better way than anybody else. And I think that ruffled a few feathers in the royal family. I think it ruffled a few feathers in the press.
Yeah.
And I think it was just the wrong way of going about it. And I think
probably didn't help with the public as well.
Yeah.
He said that irritating kind of British sense of fair play thing that, people choose to activate. It's not necessarily something that they might use on a daily basis.
But it was also
choose to activate is very true.
Yeah. It felt like, there's a very posh boy that has been given all the privilege in his life is telling everybody else that they are behaving badly. And I don't think that played well with people. I think it got people's backs up.
I do agree with you. I think it got people's backs up, absolutely. But he 100% had a point, and he had to point out to people, because like you said, people are very selective when they want to realise that things should be fair. And this is the thing, is that so much of what was written was a dog whistle. Right? And so not everybody is going to understand why things are racist, misogynistic, why misogynoir is at play, because it's dog whistling, right? And so that's why he had to be so blatant and literally write it out in black and white, no pun intended, that what is being written here is racist and misogynistic, and these are the reasons. I do agree, he got people's backs up, but if your back is up, that's because you've done something wrong.
I find it hard, and I think everyone finds it hard to take that accusation from Harry, a man who dressed as a Nazi. Journalists, editors, newspapers, all sorts of people have been on their own kind of journey on racism, how to write about things like this. And Harry, I wouldn't take any lectures from him on it. That's the problem.
It's an interesting point, because I think there's definitely there's a real change later on, because the Oprah interview is a really good example of that is the ultimate in kind of soft power press manipulation, isn't it? So it's really sort of trying to change the way that people perceive things by giving more than people are expecting. Writing one letter and saying, guys, you're out of order, that's not enough. But the interview was really, it was about laying bare, wasn't it? It was about opening everything up and, showing everybody as much as possible. Or was it?
I mean, it was about them telling their side of the story. They'd been written about so much, especially around the time of them choosing to step back as working royals. They had been written about so much. Now was their opportunity to tell their side of the story, which they did. They talked about what had happened, lifted that gilded curtain, as it were, and all the things that had led to them deciding to take the decision to step back. And the spin doctors went to town everywhere else, but they told their side of the story. That was the point in them doing that interview.
Was it successful, Matt, do you think?
No. I think it was the second disaster. The first disaster was the way that Harry went about it with the letter in early doors, when he could have done it in a better way. And Oprah, I think, was a disaster for their brand. I disagree with you. I think that they used that Oprah interview to settle scores and to moan, and that characterised the next couple of years, characterised their 6-part Harry and Meghan documentary. It was a way for them to, Meghan said she was silenced when she worked for the royal family, so it was a way for her to have a go at everyone, settle scores publicly, make racism allegations without naming anyone, which then hung over the royal family, still hangs over the royal family, hung over the last few years of the late Queen. I think it was a massive error. I think if they had gone to America and come up with love, Meghan and stuff like that, without the angry...
The bit in between.
Yeah, I think the public may have gone with them a little bit more, but I think they lost a lot of people after.
This is the thing now, is that, things seem to be very different. I mean, yes, as Matt says, the fact that she was moaning a bit about pantyhose felt a little bit old. It did. It's a shame, because actually there's been much more positivity and much more, creativity in the way that she is being perceived and the way that she's coming across. And this is obviously something that really means a lot to her.
I mean, absolutely. What Meghan has developed with As Ever, the brand, and with Love Meghan, really harks back to her years of writing her lifestyle blog, The Tig, but also, she used to teach, bookbinding, arts and crafts. These are things that she's long been passionate about. And now she's been able to turn it into a viable business. She's been able to turn it into content that she's making for Netflix, even on her social media, her Instagram page as well. She's much more able to express herself. She's falling back in love with things that she was doing before that time when she was a working royal and couldn't perhaps indulge in that. I think that's great for her, because how many people genuinely get to turn something they're passionate about into a viable business and hook up with Netflix? Not many of us.
But I mean, Matt, in a way, it's a bit impossible for her. She almost can't win. I mean, as Fira says, she's now doing things that are very creative and very inspirational. But now she's being accused of supporting this whole concept of tradwife. That she's sort of turning the clock back, and women need to take their shoes off before they get into the kitchen, that kind of thing.
It's very odd. I mean, I'm not buying up the tradwife thing. I do wonder whether her team sat down and thought, right, what's trending at the moment? Because it's quite popular, I think, on TikTok and stuff like that. What's trending at the moment? What kind of theme can we pick up and put in the show? And they tried to make a little bit of tradwife talk about stuff like that. The criticism of that, I think, it's a little bit petty. It's not something I'll kind of get involved in. I think most people are just absolutely happy for her to go off and do shows like this, non-controversial, showing her authentic self as she tells us. Go for it. It's much better than what you're doing before. But I wonder if I'm a little bit disappointed that when she was in the royal family, we heard she was this tornado of energy, 5 a.m. emails, just wanting to get her voice out, tackle some controversial issues. She did some great speeches when she was with the royal family. I remember in South Africa where she said, I'm here representing the royal family as a mother, a woman of colour, and a wife and stuff like that. And then she spoke about the Me Too movement. Since she's gone to America, since they've done Oprah, she hasn't done anything like that. She hasn't shown any kind of big authentic voice.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential there, because and she was very senior royal. She's top tier, the first ever royal member of the family of colour. She had an opportunity to really, really, really properly shake things up, and then as Matt says, it seems to have just sort of, obviously she doesn't have that platform anymore. Do you think she kind of regrets that? Do you think she misses that a little bit?
Well, let's remember she still has Archewell, which she runs with her husband, and that's, still a huge organisation that's to do with philanthropy and humanitarian work, and they do work with women and girls, they work with young people, digital safety, so they're still doing all that work. You might not see her doing speeches on the world stage about it, but that work is still ongoing.
But it is a
quietly
shame,
in the background,
because actually, if she was still part of that firm, those speeches would be front page news, wouldn't they? It wouldn't be pantyhose. It would be her, talking about really, really very big issues.
And you're absolutely right in that, it's a real missed opportunity, actually, that she is not still a working royal, because she had and still has a powerful voice and delivered some excellent speeches, like you said, and had a different reach of people, different people that she could reach all around the world. And the royal family are poorer for not having Meghan and Harry as working royals doing this really important work.
Oh, but how can you? I would imagine they think that every day, that actually there is such a resource there, but it was a resource that somehow just didn't go in the right direction. And Matt, is that something that is that a ball they dropped, do you think?
100%.
Sorry. Since when were you called Matt?
It's a tricky one. I mean, look, wouldn't it be wonderful if Harry and Meghan were there with William and Catherine, and we had this fantastic foursome supporting the king globally? That would be incredible. But I just don't think Meghan fancied it. I think she took a very short look at it. She didn't like the work. She didn't like doing the engagements. She wasn't very good at it. She's better at what she's doing now. She's better at being a celebrity, fronting TV shows. She's just, honestly, I've seen her on jobs, and it's Harry's great. Harry's great with kids. He's great with members of the public. Meghan, I don't think she fancies it.
I disagree.
And I think she saw it and she thought, there's an amazing quote when she was on tour in Australia in Valentine Lowe's book, where she was meeting lots of people, doing lots of engagements on a tour of Australia. And she said, I can't believe I'm not getting paid for this. And I think that hits, yes, we would love her to be in the royal family and working and it being successful, but I don't think she fancied it. I don't think she wanted to be a working royal. She didn't really serve that long. We've got people in their 80s and 90s still, the Dukes of Kent and the likes of them, still doing decades of service. Meghan took one look at it. I don't fancy this. This is much better for me in America.
I think when it comes to events, and especially, you talked about meeting people, we still see Meghan attending the Invictus Games. She's still attending events. She's great with families and children.
I'm talking about the Invictus Games.
People.
I've seen her at Invictus Games. Harry's great. Meghan isn't great at those events, honestly.
I don't know. I disagree with that.
It is fascinating, though, Afua. It's like, in a way, because this is all about the pursuit of the authentic Meghan. And perhaps the royal thing was never going to be her. She was never going to actually fit that role. Is she now fitting a role that you think she's getting an enormous amount of enjoyment from?
I mean, Meghan...
Is this the real Meghan now?
Meghan is who
Meghan the beekeeper.
Meghan is who she says she is, right? She's always been her authentic self. She's had to adapt to different situations. I think what we're seeing now is a woman who is being able to grow and to flourish in this role that she is in, and doing things that she loves, happy at home with her family. And I think if you go where you're appreciated, number one, and if you're watered correctly, then you're going to flourish. And that's absolutely what we're seeing.
Matt, were we watering her incorrectly in this country?
Oh, maybe it's the weather over here. Maybe that's why.
Oh, yeah.
No, I just don't think it was a good fit. We all wanted it to work. I think, as I say, Harry rightly had issues with the treatment of Meghan, and I do think things would change in the future. What happens when George gets a woman comes along for George? But
what happens when a black woman comes along for George?
I think I don't put it all down to race. I don't put it all
down to race, but it's a huge factor, right? I think it's race, it's class. She was American, divorced, a few years older than him, an actress. And she was biracial. I think
it's a very interesting thing that the lack of Britishness, because actually this is the thing, is that we've all grown up with what the royal family do. We don't. It doesn't have to be explained to us. The weirdness, the subtlety, the kind of stuff that doesn't get said, the stuff that does get said. But actually, when you've got someone who's brought into that at the last moment, who's had a very, very successful career in a completely different field, it would be extremely difficult to sit them down and completely remake, relearn.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would want to marry into the royal family, to be quite frank.
I don't think you're likely to.
I don't think I'm likely to now.
But no, you're a good-looking fella, but I don't think there's anyone available.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be really difficult getting into the royal family with all the protocols, with all the rules, with all the houses. You've got to hang out with Prince Andrew. Imagine that. You've got to have dinner with Prince Andrew.
For how much longer?
For how much longer? No. But I just don't think she fancied it. I think she viewed it as ultimate celebrity. She viewed marrying it. She loves Harry, 100%. Honestly, the two of them are amazing together. But I think she viewed this into this almost a next step onto becoming global billionaire superstar. And I don't think she wanted to do the hard work or bought into the whole idea of service.
You two are not going to agree on this.
No, absolutely not.
Well, we both like her. We both understand there's some good things
But
about
that's
her.
quite interesting is you both like different authentic Meghans. You both got your different authentic Meghans.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's always been her authentic self.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got a lot of time for Meghan.
Marvellous. There we are. Thank you very much indeed to my guests in the studio, Matt and Afua. And please keep the conversation going on our socials. Just search True Royalty TV. Thank you indeed, and see you next time.